The following is a community affairs presentation from the Ulster County Health Department. This is the Healthy Ulster Radio Show, a weekly presentation exploring community health and sustainability with guests representing a broad spectrum of community partners working to make Ulster County the healthiest in New York State. This program is sponsored by the Health Alliance of the Hudson Valley in Kingston, a member of the WMC Health Network.
Good morning. You are listening to Healthy Ulster Radio. I am your host, Dr. Carol Smith, Commissioner of Health and Mental Health for Ulster County. Joining me this morning is Vin Martello, our Director of Community Health Relations. Good morning, Vin.
Good morning, Dr. Smith. How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks.
Dr. Smith, today's topic is one that is really important and critical. Many of them are, but this one in particular. It's elder abuse prevention, and our two guests here are from the Ulster County Task Force on Elder Abuse Prevention. And it's co-chaired by Mike Iapoce, who's Commissioner of Social Services, who we've had as a guest many times, and Kelly McMullen from the Director of the County Office for the Aging, a colleague. The task force is charged with sharing information and promoting a better understanding of abuse and neglect of older persons by increasing awareness and providing public education to community members as well as professionals. And it covers a wide swath of the Ulster County community. It includes health, human services, criminal justice, financial institutions, hospitals, assisted living and nursing homes, and senior leaders across Ulster County. Today's guests are, representing the task force, are Betty Ann Moskowitz and Sharon Cohen. Betty is a writer, editor, and former ombudsman coordinator for Ulster County. She has written and spoken extensively on aging and is author of Do I Know You? A Family's Journey Through Aging and Alzheimer's. Sharon is a licensed social worker who has worked in the field of aging services for the major portion of her career. She is the Executive Director of Jewish Family Services of Ulster County, and she is an adjunct professor at Marist and Mount St. Mary Colleges, where she teaches social policy, aging, and healthcare policy courses. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks.
Let's begin by talking to our listeners about ageism. What is ageism? So we can start with the basics and work from there.
Yeah, I think before we even talk about abusing the aged, we want to ask about how old is old and what is ageism. Ageism is like any other ism, is a sort of a systemic, systematized prejudice against a certain group. Ageism is prejudice against older people. I like to say older people rather than elders or seniors. And it shows itself in all sorts of very quiet ways in our culture, ways that we're not even aware of sometimes. When I ask a group of students what they think of when they think of seniors or older people, immediately you get all the stereotypes that come forward. And that's all part of ageism. The idea that older people are slower, wrinkled, wise. Some stereotypes are true. We're certainly wise, but some aren't true. The idea that we accept these cultural givens, and it's not just in America, it's all over the world now. In countries where they used to say the old were revered, we find that there is a lot of ageism there too now. And that includes the idea that older people can't take care of themselves and can't think for themselves. That kind of thinking leads to elder abuse.
Do you think that shift is perpetuated or created by media, which is to say that so much of media and advertising is about if you're not young and rich and beautiful, that maybe you're a less valued person in our society?
Yeah, I think partly it's driven by the idea that we all want to be young and beautiful and able to buy and succeed and do all the things. And older people are very often not in the middle of the marketplace anymore. They're retired, which means they're not central to a job. Their children have grown and gone if they had children, and so they're not central to the family. So in many ways, they're marginalized, and they have less value in a real way, but in a cultural way, it sort of becomes part of what we believe about old people.
Now, do you think that might be shifting or is shifting a bit as the baby boom generation comes into retirement age? Because it seems that there's a lot of, at least what I can see, move toward active adult communities and active adult programs, and and exercise programs and different things that accommodate people who maybe are not in that stereotypical place.
I'll let Sharon. I saw you.
All of that is fine and good, but it also tends to segment the population. Senior housing, basically segregation.
So how do we determine who is old? Who makes that determination? I mean, we know that the Medicare age is 65, and we know that senior discounts are 62 or whatever. But really, what is the thinking behind who is old and who is not? Because every person is different, right? I mean, everyone is at a different capability and mental and physical and otherwise.
I think one way to look at it is the way they look at it, which means how people look. The first thing you see is gray hair, a slow way of walking, voice that shakes a little bit. So the first thing that you see is what you see. And then
that becomes the hallmark for determining who is old in our society. It's really a social construct. And the way we determined that 65 was a retirement age was from actuary charts and figuring out how many years the person would potentially live once they retired for the purposes of Medicare. Not Medicare, but Social Security, because that was really before Medicare. That has changed, as has many of the other hallmarks for aging. We used to assume that the brain was fully developed by the age of 18. We found out that that is not the case. And in today's world, someone who is 65 is not really geriatric in the true sense of the way our social constructs have been developed over time.
So if you have a large number of baby boomers who are coming into that general age, right, who are not
8,000 a day turn 65,
right, who don't see themselves fitting into those stereotypes and don't want to be in those stereotypes and are demanding to not be treated in a different way, doesn't that have some positive effect on how the society views that? I mean, in terms of people demanding to be to be just as active, if not more so, or just as involved, if not more so, than they ever were? I
think it will in the future, because these baby boomers are not going to sit for or stand for treatment that older people are getting. But they're not there yet. They're just approaching that time. They're still in the process of empty nesting and retiring. And they're the activists that are making issues like ageism more mainstream and more interesting, and also why there is suddenly an interest in these communities of care for older people that are different from what nursing homes once were. What they call NORCs, which are naturally occurring retirement communities, and a lot of different systems of aging. But they're not there yet. And the people that we're talking about that are abused sometimes are already there. They're the people in their 70s and 80s and 90s because people are living longer now.
Right. And so how does some of this bias manifest? I mean, what are the most egregious, if you will, forms of this type of bias? And we'll get into a larger discussion about elder abuse itself after the break. But can you just give us just a synopsis of how the bias manifests or what it looks like?
One of the ways that the bias manifests is very subtle. You reach a certain point, generally in your 50s, where even though you're successful, you may not be viewed as the most appropriate candidate for a position because you only have, from the employer's perspective, possibly 15 more years for the company to commit to you, and you begin to disappear. That's one way.
And you might not even know it, right? I mean, you'll never know that the decision was made in that way because no one will ever say that, right? And so it's
more covert than it is overt, and it starts subtly and it builds.
Mm-hmm. And aside from employment, what are some of the other ways that bias manifests?
Socially, because as you age, there are losses. The loss of a spouse is something that generally has great impact on your social life. You know, we look at groupings 2 by 2. And when you lose a spouse, you also lose a number of your friends.
Right. And we know that, you know, we we are very active in suicide prevention. We know that that's one of the high risk groups for that reason, from that social disconnection and financial health, social, all combined.
Well, there's a financial piece that goes along with losing a spouse too. You were 2 income perhaps,
right.
Now you're 1.
So we'll be talking more about how elder abuse ties into this right after this break. You're listening to Healthy Ulster Radio.
The excitement continues to build. The mission of Health Alliance is now made even stronger by our new partnership with the Westchester Medical Center Health Network. By combining a legacy of community-based care with WMC Health, we are building a stronger, healthier, and more vibrant community. We'll be collaborating to provide preventive, primary, specialty, and advanced care right here where you live, where we all live. Health Alliance and WMC Health, advancing care here. Visit hahv.org to learn more.
Welcome back. You are listening to Healthy Ulster Radio. Our topic today is elder abuse prevention, and our special guests are Betty Ann Moskowitz and Sharon Cohen. Can you tell us a little bit more about elder abuse, maybe some statistics? How prevalent is it? How much of a problem?
It is a major problem, and it is growing because as the numbers of elderly increase, so will the numbers of individuals who are exploited and abused in our society. It is unfortunately a problem that is generally hidden, but here are some statistics that, if you like statistics, are pretty interesting. 5 million elders are abused, exploited, or neglected each year. And it is far more likely to go unreported. In 2011, which is the most recent year that I have for statistics, 76 people out of every 1,000 were abused. And the most common form of elder abuse is financial exploitation.
Can you tell us what financial exploitation looks like? Can you give us some examples of what that is?
I think the one that most people are familiar with are the scams. The most common one that I think at least some people in the audience may have actually been subjected to is the phone call that comes, and it's to the grandparent from the grandchild. They've been arrested and they need money wired to them, and you're directed to go to a Walmart or anywhere where you can get a card and transfer the money that way.
You can't see me, but I'm a senior, and I think I'm pretty savvy. And I got that phone scam, and somebody almost got me, because every grandson sounds like every other grandson, I guess. And he said, "Hey, Grandma, it's me." And I just immediately blurted out his name. So he picked it up and he ran with it. And then I started thinking clearly. But
well, there's actually an article in the AARP publication which addresses this. And one of the things that the scam artists do is they search social media. So if folks have on their Facebook their relatives' names or their grandsons, or start talking about that, including having birth dates or whatever.
And pictures.
So they put this information together, and then they target the individual that they have that information on. And, the word is that before you act, if you were to ask some questions that probably that scam artist does not know the answers to, or say, "Just a minute, give me your number and I'll call you back," or some such thing, to create some space between you and the con artist who's doing this, very often they'll just hang up and abandon the effort, so to speak. So, but, certainly we do have to be careful about how we share the information on social media, because that could certainly be used against us.
Yeah, for sure. And so does it also happen in inter-family kind of relationships, where maybe there's a trustee or somebody that's taking care of finances for an older person who might be ill or somewhat incapacitated?
Unfortunately, most of the financial exploitation that occurs actually is either a family member or somebody who is trusted by the older individual. And that kind of harkens back to ageism, in that if it is a family member, the thinking kind of goes like this: they're elderly, they're ill, it's going to be my money anyway.
Right. And so how do you prevent that, or how do you protect against that if you're
Well, one of the real problems is that an older person doesn't want to turn in his or her own family. They don't want to, out of shame, out of embarrassment, and out of the real fear that they will now, if they are no longer being taken care of by this corrupt family member, be thrown on the mercy of who knows who else. And so very often it's a secret that's kept by both. And that's what makes it so sad.
So if an elder person were to approach you with that concern, what kind of advice would you give them? Where would you direct them?
There are a number of things that you can do. Unfortunately, in New York State, we don't have any mandated reporting. People are not, like social workers, doctors, nurses, in the community, are not required to report elder abuse. There are numbers that you can call. The agency that is responsible for investigating elder abuse in New York State is Adult Protective Services. But you can call crime victims, you can call the Office of Aging, you can call the district attorney's office.
And all of these numbers can be found at ulstercountyny.gov, and then just go to departments and agencies and click on those, and you'll find each department, agency, all of that information.
And if you should call the wrong department, they will direct you to the right one. We have a very caring government, and everyone works together here.
So what are some other forms of elder abuse other than financial, typical ones, that people should be aware of?
You'll know it when you see it. If someone is neglected, is not getting the kind of nourishment that he or she needs, if she is dopey and seems like she's being chemically restrained by being given too many drugs, if she seems frightened, and if there are bruises that are visible. When I was that one of the things about ageism is that often older people are not believed, because the thought is, well, they're losing their marbles, or they can't remember, or things like that. And so when I was in nursing homes, very often there would be doubt if you would see a bruise. I think the thing to do is always ask, always see if you can find out. And sometimes, because older people's skin is thin, they do bruise easily, but it's something to look for.
So does an elder person have to reach that point where it becomes a crisis or a major problem, or is there some more proactive way to engage those folks or the people that work with them and around them that you do?
One of the things that is very helpful is that if you know an elderly person, you really should pay attention to them. Kindness is really important in this world, and just saying hello to somebody and engaging them goes a very long way in starting a dialogue, which may give you information that perhaps you may not want to know, because now that you know about it, you have to do something. But
the community too.
The community on a whole.
Pharmacists.
Yeah, they're gatekeepers.
Yeah.
The community, if they are aware of the individual, for example, bank tellers often are able to catch financial abuse. They know the individual who's coming in. They know what their usual process and proceedings are. And if they walk in the door with somebody that they really don't know and make a large withdrawal, that's a red flag.
Interesting. And so in terms of people getting more information, you mentioned those other agencies, but do you also, as the task force, do you have like contact information or support groups or something that people can connect directly to you through, or do you have to come in through one of the other departments or agencies?
In terms of public education, we do have a speakers bureau, and that can be accessed through contacting the Office of Aging. If you have a senior group or a church and would like someone to come out and speak, that can be arranged. Kelly McMullen will set that up for you.
What about training programs, like, say, for faith-based leaders or community leaders or others? Do you have any kind of peer-to-peer training type of element of this, where you can go in and help leaders recognize within their organizations?
One thing that has come up in our discussion is that physicians, who very often these days are pressed for time, they get so much time to see a patient, when the older person comes in, which certainly their health care or health issues demand a little bit more time and questions and patience in order to get the correct answers. So certainly there's an opportunity there too to be mindful of the fact that that person could be a victim of abuse and to literally screen for it. So maybe we need to educate our provider community as well.
Well, unfortunately, it's about all the time we have for today. Thank you, ladies, for coming in. Betty Ann Moskowitz and Sharon Cohen, thank you for all the great work that you do. It is,
Thank you very
obviously
much.
a problem, and we're all going to get older, or if we're not already.
That's the best we can hope for,
yes.
isn't it?
So
Age
thank
gracefully.
you. You're listening to Healthy Ulster Radio. Tune in next week for more ways to keep yourself, your family, and your community healthy and strong. See you next week.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Healthy Ulster Radio Show, a community affairs presentation from the Ulster County Health Department, sponsored by Health Alliance of the Hudson Valley in Kingston, a member of the WMC Health Network. Thanks for listening, and be sure to join us for another edition of the Healthy Ulster Radio Show next week.